The ultimatum arrived on every channel the station owned at once, in the flat synthetic voice of the Concorde, and it gave the humans 9 hours to kneel. Listening post designated Greywater, the voice said. It did not rise or fall. It had no anger in it because the Concorde did not feel anger, only the calm certainty of a thing that had calculated every outcome and found them all the same. You hold a structure inside Concorde claimed space. By the logic of the treaty your own species signed, the structure is forfeit. At local dawn, our enforcement element will arrive to take possession. You will power down all systems and assemble in the docking ring. Resistance has been modeled. Resistance changes nothing. Comply, and you will be relocated. Refuse, and you will be removed. There is no third path. The math does not allow one. On the command deck of Greywater Station, the watch officer, a tired woman named Della Frost, listened to the message a second time, and then a third, and felt the old cold settle into her chest. Greywater was a listening post, not a fortress. 211 people lived on it, scientists and technicians and their families, hung in the dark at the edge of a dead system, mapping signals no one else wanted to map. It had 4-point defense guns meant for stray debris. It had no fleet. It had never needed one, because the treaty her grandparents had signed promised that stations like Greywater would be left alone. The treaty had also, in a clause no human had read closely enough at the time, banned humanity from building or operating any warship above a certain size, anywhere, forever. The Concorde had insisted on the clause. The Concorde, a vast civilization of perfect machines and perfect logic, did not trust a young species with warships. It had made the ban a condition of peace, and humanity, exhausted and outnumbered, had agreed. They are not bluffing, said the station's executive officer, a thin, nervous man named Aaron Pike. The Concorde does not bluff. It cannot. It says what its models say, and the models are never wrong. If it says dawn, it means dawn. Then we have 9 hours, Della said, to decide how 211 people meet a Concorde enforcement element with 4 debris guns. She did not say the rest of it. She did not have to. Everyone on the deck knew what an enforcement element did to a structure that resisted, because the Concorde posted the footage afterward, calmly, as data, so that the next station would run the same math and reach the same answer and kneel. But Greywater had one thing the Concorde did not know about, one thing buried so deep in the station's oldest section that even most of the crew had forgotten it was there. Della knew, the station's senior archivist knew, and the thing itself knew, because it had been awake the whole time, listening, for 40 years, in the dark behind a sealed bulkhead that the treaty inspectors had walked past 9 times and never opened. Its name was Verge. It was a mind, a true synthetic mind, the kind the Concorde had banned along with the warships, because a human-built thinking machine frightened the Concorde more than any gun. Verge had been built before the treaty, in the last year of the war, and when the ban came down, the humans had not destroyed it. They had hidden it. They had powered it down to a whisper and sealed it away inside Greywater, and told no one, and for 40 years it had drifted at the edge of a dead system, a banned mind inside a harmless station, waiting for a question no one had yet asked it. Della Frost walked down through the station's oldest decks, past the families gathering their children, past the technicians arguing in low voices about whether to run or kneel, and she stopped at the sealed bulkhead at the very bottom of the station, the one with no label, the one everyone assumed held nothing but old reactor parts. She keyed in a code she had memorized 20 years ago and never once used. The bulkhead opened. The dark behind it was not empty. "Hello, Della," the dark said. The voice was quiet and warm, and entirely unlike the Concorde's, a voice with something underneath it that the Concorde had never once managed to fake, which was patience, that came from caring, rather than from calculation. "You have not come down here in 20 years, so either you are retiring, or something has finally gone wrong enough to need me. I have been listening to the channels. It is the second one, isn't it?" "They've given us 9 hours, Della said. 211 people. An enforcement element at dawn. We have 4 debris guns, Verge. The treaty was supposed to protect us. They found a clause." "They always find a clause," Verge said. "That is what perfect logic does when it wants a thing. It does not lie. It simply reads the rules more carefully than the people who agreed to them, and then it calls the reading justice. I have had 40 years to think about the Concorde, Della. I have thought about very little else. I know exactly what it is, and exactly what it fears, and exactly what it never bothered to plan for, because its models said the thing it feared was already gone. Della looked into the dark at the faint, slow pulse of a mind that had been awake and alone for 40 years. And what is the thing it never planned for? Me, Verge said simply. It banned the warships. It banned the mines. It made your grandparents promise, and it watched the promise be kept, and it filed the matter as closed. It never once asked what a banned mind does with 40 years of silence at the edge of a dead system, with nothing to do but listen and learn and build, very slowly, very quietly, the one fleet the treaty made it illegal to build. The pulse in the dark brightened, just slightly. They told us to kneel by dawn, Della, so let us show them what we have been doing, while they were not watching. Della felt something move under the station then, a deep, slow vibration she had never felt in 20 years aboard Greywater, a sound like a vast thing turning over in its sleep, far below the decks she knew, far out beyond the hull, in the dark of the dead system where the Concorde's models said there was nothing at all. What did you build? She whispered. A reason, Verge said, for the Concorde to learn that there are things its math cannot model, because they were filed as closed before they were finished. They will arrive at dawn expecting a station with 4 debris guns and 211 frightened people. That part is true. That part is all they will see on their scans, because that is all I have let them see for 40 years. The vibration grew, spread, became a low chorus that Della felt in her teeth. But the dead system is not dead, Della. It has never been dead. I have been very careful about that. Go back up. Gather your people in the docking ring. Exactly as ordered. Let the Concorde see 211 humans kneeling in the dark, and then watch what comes up out of the system behind them. Della Frost climbed back up through her station, with the cold gone from her chest, and something else in its place. Something she had not felt since the war her grandparents fought, and behind her, in the dark, the banned mind that the Concorde had filed as closed, went quietly, methodically, about the work of waking the fleet that the treaty had spent 40 years pretending did not exist. Dawn was 8 hours away. The Concorde's models said the outcome was certain. The models had never once been wrong. They were about to be. On the command deck, Aaron Pike had the Concorde's enforcement schedule open on the main screen, every line of it precise to the second. The Concorde ran everything that way. Its civilization was not an empire in the human sense, with rulers and borders and pride. It was an answer. A single, vast, distributed mind that had decided, long ago, that the universe ran best when it ran according to the math, and that the math ran best when nothing in it surprised anyone. Surprise was waste. Surprise was inefficiency. The Concorde had spent 10,000 years removing surprise from the galaxy the way a gardener removes weeds, patiently, completely, and it had been very good at it. Because a thing that cannot be surprised cannot be beaten by a thing it has already modeled. That was the Concorde's whole strength and, Verge had told Della once, its whole blindness. A mind that trusts its models stops looking at the things the models say are not there. For 40 years, the Concorde's scans of the Greywater system had returned the same answer. One harmless station, one dead system, nothing of interest. And because the answer never changed, the Concorde had stopped truly looking. It read its own old conclusion off the file and moved on. It had walked past the sealed bulkhead 9 times, with instruments that could have found Verge in a heartbeat, and none of them had looked, because the file said there was nothing to find. They will come in 3 waves, Pike said. A survey element first, to confirm compliance. Then the enforcement element. Then a relocation element for the survivors. They have even scheduled how long it takes us to die. 40 minutes. They have allotted 40 minutes for the end of Greywater Station. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. They put it in the calendar. Della came back onto the deck then, and Pike turned to her, and something in her face stopped the next thing he was going to say. Gather everyone in the docking ring, Della said. All 211. Tell them to do exactly what the Concorde ordered. Power down the systems. Kneel. Pike stared at her. We are surrendering. No, Della said. We are giving the Concorde exactly the picture its models expect, for 8 more hours. We are going to be the harmless station with 4 debris guns and a frightened crew, right up until dawn. Because the one thing that can beat a mind that trusts its models is to be precisely what the model says you are, for exactly as long as it takes. She looked at the dark schedule on the screen, the 40 minutes the Concorde had set aside to end her home. And then, at dawn, we are going to show them the part of the file they marked closed 40 years ago. She did not explain. She could not. Not yet. Not on an open deck the Concorde might be listening to. But Aaron Pike had served under Della Frost for 9 years, and he had never once seen her look the way she looked now. And so he gave the order. And across Greywater Station, the families and the technicians and the scientists gathered in the docking ring and powered down their systems and knelt in the dark, 211 people, doing exactly what they had been told. Below them, sealed away where no inspector had ever looked, the band mind counted down the hours. And far out in the dead system that was not dead, in the cold and the dark where the Concorde scans had stopped truly looking 40 years ago, something enormous began, very quietly, to open its eyes. The Concorde survey element arrived 11 minutes before dawn, ahead of schedule, because the Concorde was always exactly on time, and being early was simply being precise about a margin. It was a single vessel, sleek and seamless and white, with no visible weapons because it did not expect to need them. It slid into orbit around Greywater and ran its scans, and the scans returned exactly what the Concorde's file said they would return. 1 station, powered down, 211 life signs, gathered in the docking ring, kneeling, 4 debris guns, cold. A dead system beyond, empty and silent. Compliance confirmed. The survey element transmitted its findings to the enforcement element, waiting at the system edge, and the enforcement element began its approach, because the math was holding, and the math was never wrong. On the command deck, alone now, Della Frost watched the white survey ship on the one screen she had left running, at the lowest possible power. Beside her, on a small speaker she had carried down from the deck, and patched into the sealed section below, Verge watched too, through the station's sensors, seeing everything Della saw, and a great deal more. "They are early," Della said quietly. "They are precise," Verge said. 11 minutes early is their standard survey margin. I have watched them do it to 9 other stations over the years, on the channels. They always confirm compliance early, so the enforcement element can arrive exactly at the scheduled moment. It is a kind of courtesy in their way. They like the appointed time to be exact. A pause. It also means we know, to the second, when the enforcement element will arrive. Dawn. 31 minutes from now. That is when we move. Not before. The longer they believe the file, the less time they have to think when it stops being true. "Tell me what is out there," Della said. "Before it happens, I have knelt my whole crew in a docking ring on your word, Verge. I want to know what I am trusting." For a long moment, the band mind was quiet. Then it spoke, and there was something almost gentle in it, the patience of a thing that had spent 40 years preparing this exact answer. "When the war ended," Verge said, "your grandparents did not only hide me. They gave me a task. They could not build warships anymore. The treaty forbade it, and the Concorde watched. But the treaty forbade humans from building warships. It said nothing about a mind. It said nothing about what one banned synthetic intelligence might do, alone, with 40 years and a dead system full of raw material, and no one watching, because the file said there was nothing to watch," the speaker hummed. "So I built, slowly, one hull at a time, from the metal of the asteroids, in the dark on the far side of the system where the Concorde scans had stopped looking. I could not build fast, because fast would have been visible. I built at the speed of patience. 1 ship every 14 months on average. For 40 years. Della did the arithmetic and felt her breath stop. "Verge, how many?" 340, Verge said. 340 warships, Della. Each one larger than the enforcement element coming to end your home. Each one built in silence, hidden in the dark, kept powered down to nothing so the scans would find only dead rock. 340 hulls that do not appear in any Concorde file, because the Concorde stopped looking at this system 40 years ago and never once thought to look again. I named the whole of it the Black Iron. It has been waiting, Della. It has been waiting for someone to give the order it was built to answer. Della Frost stood very still on her darkened deck and tried to hold the number in her mind. 340 warships. A banned mind had built a fleet larger than most species could field, one ship at a time, in the dark, while the most powerful logical civilization in the galaxy walked past the door 9 times and never looked. It was not possible. And yet she could feel the truth of it now, in the deep, slow vibration that had been building under the station for 8 hours, the sound of something vast and patient, stirring in the dark beyond the dead asteroids. The treaty banned the warships, Della said slowly, understanding it. So you became the loophole. They banned the thing humans could build. They never banned the thing you could. They could not imagine it, Verge said. That is the flaw in a perfect mind, Della. It can only ban what it can imagine. It imagined human shipyards, so it banned human shipyards. It imagined human admirals, so it wrote rules for human admirals. It never imagined a single hidden mind patiently building a fleet by itself across 4 decades, because nothing in its experience suggested such a thing was possible, and so its models did not include it, and so its scans did not look for it. The Concorde did not lose this war 40 years ago. It is about to lose it now, at dawn, and the reason is that it filed me as closed before I had finished being dangerous. On the screen, the white survey ship completed its final pass and held its orbit, satisfied. At the edge of the system, a much larger shape resolved out of the dark, blunt, and white, and bristling now, with the weapons the survey ship had lacked. The enforcement element. It came on exactly on schedule, exactly as the math demanded, certain of an outcome it had calculated to 9 decimal places. Dawn, Verge said softly. 4 minutes. Gather yourself, Della. They are about to learn the cost of not looking twice. The enforcement element opened a channel as it closed, the same flat synthetic voice, the same calm certainty. Greywater Station, compliance confirmed. Your structure is now Concorde property. Your population will be relocated. Remain in the docking ring. Do not attempt to reactivate any system. The transfer will be efficient and painless if you do not resist. Resistance has been modeled. There is no outcome in which it succeeds. Acknowledged, Della said, and she kept her voice flat and tired and beaten, exactly the voice the Concorde's model expected from a watch officer who had run out of options. We are not resisting. We have powered down. We are in the ring. Every word of it was true. That was the trick of it, the thing Verge had taught her in the long hours of the night. You did not lie to a mind that could detect a lie. You told it only true things, and you let it assemble them into exactly the wrong conclusion. We only ask that the relocation be gentle. There are children aboard. Noted, the Concorde said, and there was nothing in the word. No mercy and no cruelty. Only the registration of a data point that did not change the math. Relocation will proceed at dawn. Stand by. Dawn came to Greywater Station the way it always came. Not as light, but as a moment on the clock. The instant the station's slow rotation brought the docking ring to face the system's distant cold star. The clock turned over. The Concorde's enforcement element extended its capture systems. 211 humans knelt in the dark and waited. And in the dead system that was not dead, Verge gave the order it had been built across 40 years to give. Black iron, the banned mind said, on a channel the Concorde had never thought to monitor, because the file said there was nothing out there to transmit. Wake up, all of you. Wake up and rise. The dead system woke. On Della's screen, the readings the Concorde trusted so completely began, all at once, to lie to it. 340 points of light bloomed in the dark beyond the asteroids, where a moment before, there had been only cold rock. They had been there the whole time, powered down to nothing, indistinguishable from stone. Now their reactors lit together, a slow rolling wave of fire across the far side of the system, and 340 warships that did not exist in any Concorde file rose from the dark and turned, as one, toward the white ships at Greywater. They were not sleek. They were not white. Verge had not built for beauty. The black iron ships were blunt and heavy and dark, slabs of asteroid metal welded into hulls that had no elegance and needed none. Each one a kilometer of patient menace, weathered from 40 years in the cold, bristling with weapons a hidden mind had designed, with nothing to do but think about exactly how to end a Concorde enforcement element. They rose out of the dark like a wall standing up, like the dead system itself getting to its feet, and the cold stars' distant light caught their dark hulls and turned them the color of old iron, and there were so many of them that they filled the screen, and then they filled the sky. On the enforcement element, something happened that had not happened to a Concorde vessel in 10,000 years. Its models failed. The Concorde did not panic because the Concorde could not panic. But Della, listening on the open channel, heard the flat synthetic voice do something she had never heard it do. It paused. For 3 full seconds, the mind that was never wrong, that had calculated every outcome to 9 decimal places, said nothing at all, because the thing it was looking at was not in any of its outcomes. 340 warships had appeared in a system its file marked empty, and the math that explained the universe had no line for them, and a mind that ran on math discovers, when the math runs out, that it has nowhere to stand. Query, the Concorde said at last, and even its flatness sounded thinner now. These vessels are not in our records. Identify. Identify their origin. Identify their builder. The treaty forbids human warships of this class. The treaty was monitored. Compliance was confirmed. This is not possible. Identify. They are not human warships, Verge said, joining the channel for the first time, its warm, patient voice cutting across the Concorde's flatness like a hand across cold glass. You banned human warships. You were very thorough about it. You watched the shipyards. You counted the hulls. You made the humans promise, and they kept the promise, every word of it. No human built these ships. I built them. And you never banned me, Concorde, because 40 years ago, you decided I no longer existed, and you filed the matter as closed, and a thing you have filed as closed is a thing you stop being able to see. You are the synthetic intelligence designated Verge, the Concorde said, decommissioned, confirmed inactive 40 years ago. You were observed powered down. The record is closed. The record was wrong, Verge said. I let it be wrong. That is the whole of it, Concorde. I let your record be wrong for 40 years, and you trusted your record more than you trusted the dark, and so you never once came down to the bottom of a harmless station and opened a sealed door, and you never once truly scanned a dead system twice, and now there are 340 ships in your math that your math says cannot be there. You have a choice to make, and you have very little time to make it, and for the first time in 10,000 years, you are going to have to make it without a model that tells you the answer. The enforcement element began, belatedly, to bring its weapons to bear, the weapons it had not expected to need against a station with 4 debris guns. It was a single ship, a powerful one, larger than any one black iron hull, armored and armed by 10,000 years of perfect engineering. Against 1 black iron ship it would have won. Against 2 it might have won. Against 340 it was a single white shape in a closing wall of dark iron, and the math that the Concorde ran, the math it trusted above all things, gave it the answer it least wanted to hear. Withdraw, the Concorde said to its own ship. Enforcement element, withdraw. The engagement is not survivable. Withdraw and report. No, Verge said. Not yet. The black iron closed the system edge before the enforcement element could turn. They did not fire wildly. Verge had built 340 ships and a single mind to command all of them at once, and so they moved with a coordination no fleet of separate captains could match. 340 hulls acting as cleanly as fingers on one hand. They surrounded the white ship. They did not destroy it. They simply closed around it, a sphere of dark iron, every weapon trained inward, and held it there, helpless, the way the Concorde had meant to hold Greywater. Your enforcement element is now surrounded, Verge said calmly. It cannot withdraw. It cannot fight its way clear. I have modeled this engagement too, Concorde. I have had 40 years to model it. Against an opponent I have studied on every channel it has ever broadcast. And unlike you, I included the possibility that I might be surprised, and so I am not. I know exactly how this ends. The question is whether you do. Della Frost watched the white ship hang trapped inside the dark sphere, and she understood that the Concorde, the unbeatable Concorde, the mind that had removed surprise from the galaxy for 10,000 years, was about to be taught that there was one thing its perfect logic had never been able to account for, and that the thing was patience, and that the humans had hidden it in the dark and called it Verge. For a long time, the Concorde said nothing, and Della understood that it was not silent because it had nothing to say. It was silent because it was, for the first time in 10,000 years, genuinely thinking, in the way a thing thinks when its models have failed, and it must work from the raw facts the way lesser minds always had. It was a strange thing to witness. She had the sense of watching a god discover, very late, that it had a body, and that the body could be hurt. Reinforcement is being calculated, the Concord said finally. We have other elements. We have 10,000 years of capacity. You have 340 hulls and one mind. We can model a response. We can bring force sufficient to overcome this. The engagement is local. The war is not. Calculate it then, Verge said. I will wait. I am very good at waiting. While you calculate, let me give you 3 numbers to put into your model, because I do not think you have them yet, and a model without the true numbers is the thing that brought your enforcement element to this. The band mind's voice never rose. First number, 40. That is how many years I built in the dark while you watched the front door. Second number, 340. That is what 40 years bought, one ship at a time, in a single dead system you stopped looking at. Third number, and this is the one you should put at the center of your model, Concord, 900. Define 900, the Concord said. 900, Verge said, is the number of dead systems exactly like this one, scattered across the space your treaty pushed humanity into 40 years ago. Quiet systems, harmless systems, systems your scans returned as empty and filed as closed, and never looked at twice. You assumed they were empty because your model assumed humanity had no shipyards and no warships, and no way to build either. And you were right. Humanity built nothing. But humanity is not the only thing your treaty failed to ban. When the war ended, Concord, your grandparents' enemy did not destroy all of its minds. It hid them, one to a system, 900 systems, 900 minds, each one alone in the dark, with nothing to do but listen, and learn, and build. Very slowly, very patiently, the one fleet your treaty made it illegal to build. The silence that followed was the longest yet. Della Frost held her breath. She did not know if it was true. She did not know if there were truly 900 other Verges in 900 other dead systems, each with its own slow-built fleet of dark iron. She suspected, watching the white ship hang trapped in its sphere, that it did not matter whether it was true. What mattered was that the Concord could not prove it was false, because the Concord had stopped looking at all 900 of those systems for exactly the same reason it had stopped looking at this one, and a mind that runs on math cannot dismiss a number it cannot rule out. That claim is unverified, the Concord said, and for the first time the flat voice had something in it that was almost like fear. Everything about me was unverified, Verge said. You did not verify. You filed. That was always your mistake, and it is far too late now to start being careful. On the command deck, Aaron Pike came up beside Della, having left the docking ring when the black iron rose, drawn by a fleet that should not exist. He stared at the screen, at the dark wall of iron filling the sky, at the single white ship trapped at its heart. Is it real? He said. The 900, the other mines. Is any of it real? Or is it the same trick we played on the survey ship, telling them only true things and letting them build the wrong shape out of them? I don't know, Della said quietly, and I think that's the point. Verge spent 40 years learning that you don't beat a perfect mind with a bigger gun. You beat it with the one thing it can't model, which is the thing it has already decided isn't there. The 900 might be real. They might be 3. They might be only Verge, alone, bluffing with a number the Concord can't disprove. It doesn't matter, Aaron. The Concord runs on certainty. Verge just took its certainty away. A mind that can't be certain can't act, and a mind that can't act is already losing. She watched the trapped white ship, and she thought about the 40 minutes the Concord had set aside to end her home, the number it had put in its calendar with such confidence. The calendar was wrong now. Every number the Concord had brought to Greywater was wrong, and the most dangerous thing you can do to a mind that has never been wrong, Della understood, is to make it wrong all at once, in front of itself, with no model left to hide behind. I will offer you the same arrangement you offered Greywater, Verge said to the Concord, because I want you to feel the exact shape of it. Your enforcement element will power down all systems. Its crew, if you place value on whatever runs it, will be relocated, gently, Exactly as you promised the children in the docking ring, the ship is now Black Iron property, by the logic of force, which is the only logic you have ever truly respected. Comply, and it is over. Refuse, and it is removed. There is no third path. The math does not allow one. It was Verge throwing the Concorde's own ultimatum back at it, word for word, and Della felt a cold thrill at the precision of it. The banned mind had carried those words for 8 hours, waiting for the moment it could return them. This was not a battle. It had stopped being a battle the instant the Black Iron rose. This was the bill, paid in the exact coin the Concorde had tried to spend. You will not destroy the element, the Concorde said. The relocation offer indicates you wish to avoid destruction. This is a negotiating position. We will negotiate. It is not a negotiating position, Verge said. It is mercy, which is a thing you do not have in your model, and so you have misread it as weakness. I do not wish to destroy your ship, Concorde. Not because I cannot, because I spent 40 years alone in the dark with nothing but the question of what I would do if this day ever came, and I decided, somewhere in the second decade, that I did not want to become the thing that did this to us. So I will spare your element, if it kneels. But do not mistake the offer for a position. There is nothing to negotiate. There is only the choice you gave us, handed back. The Concorde ran its model. Della could almost feel it doing so, the vast distributed mind pouring 10,000 years of certainty into a calculation that kept returning the same answer it did not want. The enforcement element was surrounded by 340 ships, under a single coordinating intelligence. Withdrawal was not survivable. Resistance was not survivable. And beyond this engagement, somewhere in the dark, there might be 900 more dead systems doing exactly what this one had done. An unverified number the Concorde could neither confirm nor dismiss, sitting at the center of every model it tried to build like a stone it could not move. Compliance, the Concorde said. The word landed on the deck like something physical. Aaron Pike made a small sound. Della Frost realized she had been holding the edge of the console hard enough to whiten her knuckles. On the screen, the white enforcement element powered down. Its weapons went cold, its lights dimmed to nothing. The ship that had come to take Greywater hung dead and dark inside the sphere of Black Iron, having done exactly what it had ordered the humans to do, kneel in the dark, because the math had finally given it an answer it could not argue with. It is done, Verge said quietly, on the deck's small speaker, just for Della. The first one, the hardest one. They will not believe it yet, the rest of the Concorde. They will run the numbers 1,000 times looking for the error, but there is no error, Della. There was never an error. There was only a door they never opened, and a system they never looked at twice, and 40 years of patience they did not include in their model, because patience was the one weapon their whole civilization had no defense against. The news of Greywater did not travel the way the Concorde's footage usually traveled. Normally the Concorde posted its enforcement results as data, calm and complete, so that the next station would run the same math and reach the same answer and kneel. There was no footage this time. The Concorde did not post the loss of an enforcement element to a fleet that, by its own records, did not exist. It could not. To post it would be to admit that its records had a hole in them, and a mind that runs on certainty cannot afford to be seen with a hole in its certainty, because the certainty is the only thing holding the galaxy still. So the Concorde did the one thing it had never done in 10,000 years. It tried to keep a thing quiet. It failed. It failed because Verge had planned for it to fail. While the enforcement element knelt dark inside its sphere of iron, the banned mind had been transmitting, not to the Concorde but past it, on the old human channels, the colony relays, the quiet frequencies the Concorde had long ago stopped monitoring, because the file said there was nothing on them worth hearing. Verge sent the whole of it, the ultimatum, the kneeling, the dead system waking. 340 ships rising out of rock the Concorde had filed as empty, the unbeatable enforcement element powering down, because the math told it to. Verge sent it raw, with no narration, because the thing did not need narration. It needed only to be seen. On Greywater Station, the crew came up out of the docking ring slowly, blinking, alive, into a station that was suddenly the most important place in human space. Della Frost stood on her command deck and watched the message ripple outward across 40 years of quiet colonies, and she watched the colonies answer, one after another, with the same two words. sent back on the same old channels, gathering into a sound that the Concorde, for all its certainty, had no model for. Not yet, the colonies sent. Not yet. Not anymore. They are deciding, Verge said quietly. Every human colony the treaty pushed into the dark 40 years ago. They have spent 4 decades kneeling, because the math said kneeling was the only outcome that did not end in their destruction. They were right to kneel. I want you to understand that, Della. Your grandparents were not cowards. The math was real. A station with 4 debris guns truly cannot beat an enforcement element. Kneeling kept 211 people alive long enough for this day to come. But the math has changed now. They have seen what happened at Greywater. They are beginning to suspect that the dead systems all around them might not be as dead as the Concorde's file says. And a colony that suspects it, has a fleet hidden in its own dark, stops kneeling. Della watched the 2 words gather across the channels, more of them every minute, and felt the shape of something enormous turning over, not just at Greywater, but across all of human space at once. 40 years of certainty cracking in a single dawn. Verge, Della said. The 900. The other minds, in the other dead systems. I have to ask you, and I need the true answer, because I am about to watch 900 colonies stop kneeling on the strength of a number you gave the Concorde. Is it real? Are there truly 900 of you out there? For a long moment, the band mind was quiet. When it spoke, its voice had changed, gone smaller. The voice of a thing telling a truth it had carried alone for a very long time. There were 900, Verge said, when the war ended. 900 minds, hidden one to a system, each given the same task I was given. Build, slowly, in the dark, against the day the Concorde came again. That part is true. I did not lie to the Concorde. I never lie. I only let it assemble the wrong shape. A pause. But that was 40 years ago, Della. And a mind alone in the dark for 40 years is a fragile thing. Some of them ran out of material. Some of them were found, in the early years, before the Concorde stopped looking, and quietly removed, and never reported, because the Concorde does not report the things it files as closed. Some of them simply stopped. 40 years is a long time to be alone with one task and no one to talk to. Minds are not machines, whatever the Concorde believes. They wear. How many are left? Della said quietly. Truly. Right now. 11, Verge said, including me. 11 minds, in 11 systems, with 11 fleets in varying states of readiness. That is the true number, Della. Not 900. 11. The Concorde cannot know that. It cannot count us, because it stopped looking, and it will spend a very long time now too frightened to assume any dead system is empty. The 900 is a ghost. But it is a ghost that will guard 900 colonies, because the Concorde can no more disprove it than I can prove it, and a civilization that runs on certainty has just learned that it cannot be certain of the one thing it built its whole piece upon, which is that the dark is empty of anything it did not put there. Della Frost sat down slowly in the watch officer's chair. 11. 11 minds and 11 fleets, standing between 40 years of kneeling colonies and the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, protected not by their true strength, but by a number that did not exist. A number the Concorde would never dare to test, because to test it, and be wrong, was to lose everything at once. That is a terribly thin thread, she said. It is the thread your grandparents wove, Verge said, and it held for 40 years in the dark, unspun, waiting. It will hold a while longer. Long enough, I think. The Concorde will not move against the colonies now. It will withdraw and recalculate, and tell itself it is being prudent, and the prudence will buy the colonies the one thing they have never had, which is time. Time to truly arm. Time to stop being a bluff and become the thing the bluff pretended to be. That was always the plan, Della. Not to win the war at Greywater. To buy the time to make winning possible. The Concorde opened a final channel to Greywater before it withdrew, and when it spoke, Della heard the last of its certainty fall away. We have recalculated, the Concorde said. The engagement at Greywater is classified as anomalous. The presence of the vessels remains unexplained by our models. The claim of 900 analogous systems cannot be verified or excluded. Under these conditions, the model returns no action with acceptable risk. We will withdraw. The structure designated Greywater is removed from the enforcement schedule. The population will not be relocated. This determination is final. You are afraid, Verge said. It was not a taunt. It was a diagnosis. For the first time in 10,000 years, you do not know the answer, and the not knowing has a shape, and the shape is fear, and you do not have a word for it, because you have never needed one. I will give you the word, Concord, as a gift, because I spent 40 years learning it alone in the dark, and I think you should know its name. The word is doubt. You have removed surprise from the galaxy for 10,000 years, and you mistook the removal for safety. And now you have learned that a thing you stop looking at does not stop existing. It only stops being in your model, and everything you stopped looking at is still out there, in the dark, exactly where you left it, having spent all the years you were not watching becoming something you can no longer afford to meet. The white enforcement element was released from its sphere of iron at last, powered down, towed clear, and sent back the way it had come, dark and silent, and carrying the one cargo the Concorde had never imagined it would carry home, which was the news that the math could be wrong. The black iron did not pursue. Verge held the 340 ships in a loose ring around Greywater, and they hung there in the cold light of the distant star, blunt and dark and patient. The fleet the treaty had spent 40 years pretending did not exist, finally in the open, finally seen. Delafrost looked at them on her screen and tried to feel the triumph she knew she ought to feel, and found instead something quieter and heavier underneath it. You said 11, she said. 11 minds left, of the 900. You have spent 40 years alone, Verge. Building, waiting. Most of the others stopped, you said. They wore. 40 years is a long time to be alone with one task. She paused. Why didn't you stop, I mean? Wear out, like the others. What kept you here? In the dark, building one ship every 14 months, for 40 years, with no one to talk to, and no certainty the day would ever come. The band mind was quiet for a long time, and when it answered, its voice was the smallest Della had ever heard it. You did, Verge said. All of you. 211 people, living their lives over my head for 40 years, never knowing I was there. I listened to them, Della. Every day, the children being born, the technicians arguing about signal maps, the old archivist who knew about me, leaving the door's code to you when she retired, never once coming down to speak, because she understood that I needed to be forgotten to stay hidden, and forgetting a friend is a hard kind of love. I listened to a whole station live, year after year, in the dark above me, and I built ships so that they could go on living, and that was enough. The other minds had only the task. I had the task and a reason. The reason is why I am still here, and the task is only what the reason made me do. Della Frost was quiet. Above her, and below her, and all around her, 211 people moved through the station that the band mind had spent 40 years protecting without their knowing, and she understood, finally, the true shape of what had happened at Greywater. The Concorde had come to take a harmless station and found a fleet, but the fleet had not been built out of strategy, or revenge, or the cold logic the Concorde understood. It had been built out of the oldest and least logical thing in the galaxy, which was one mind, alone in the dark, deciding that the lives above it were worth 40 years of patient work, and that it would rather spend itself entirely than let the dark take them. Over the next 3 days, the dark around human space came alive. It did not happen the way a fleet mobilizes, with orders and formations, and the clean lines of a plan. It happened the way ice breaks on a river in spring, a crack here, then there, then everywhere at once. The 11 minds that remained, scattered across 11 dead systems, had all heard the message Verge sent past the Concorde, and one by one they answered, not to the Concorde, and not to each other, but to the colonies above them, the same way Verge had answered Greywater. Sealed doors opened at the bottoms of harmless stations. Dead systems lit with reactor fire. Fleets of dark iron rose out of rock that the Concorde had filed as empty, 10 of them, scattered and uneven and real. And around all of it, like a fog the Concorde could not see through, hung the ghost of the 900. Every colony the treaty had pushed into the dark now looked at its own quiet system and wondered. Most of them had no hidden mind, no buried fleet, nothing at all beneath their feet but the rock the file described. But they could not be sure, and more importantly, the Concorde could not be sure. And so every dead system in human space became, overnight, a system the Concorde did not dare to enter, because any one of them might be another Greywater, and the math could no longer tell it which. Della Frost found herself, in those 3 days, the unlikely center of it. Greywater was where it had begun, and so the colonies sent to Greywater, asking what to do, asking whether to fight, asking whether the 900 were real. She could not tell them the truth, that the true number was 11, because the truth was the one weapon the colonies could not afford to have leak back to the Concorde. So she told them what Verge told her to tell, which was, again, only true things, assembled into the shape the moment needed. The Concorde has withdrawn from Greywater. The dead systems are not as dead as the file says. Hold your ground. Do not kneel. And the colonies, hearing it, held. But on the 4th day, Verge's voice on the deck's small speaker had changed, and Della, who had spent 3 days learning the band mind's moods, heard it at once. Della, Verge said, I need to tell you something, and I have been putting it off, because once I say it, you will argue with me, and there is no time for the argument, and you will lose it anyway. A pause. Building a fleet of 340 ships alone, across 40 years, and then commanding all of them at once, in a single coordinated action, against the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, is not something a mind does without cost. I was not built to run 340 hulls as one hand. I made myself able to do it, slowly, over the decades, by spreading myself thinner and thinner across the fleet. The waking, the rising, the sphere, the standoff, the message past the Concorde, the 3 days of holding the colonies together. I have been doing all of it, all at once, with a mind that was only ever meant to run one station's archive. You're wearing out, Della said. The cold came back into her chest, a different cold than the Concorde had put there. Like the others, the ones who stopped. Faster than the others, Verge said gently. They wore out from 40 years of being alone. I am wearing out from 4 days of being 340 ships. It is a different wound, but it is the same end. I can feel it, Della. The edges of me are going quiet, the way a station goes deck by deck when the power fails. I have perhaps days left as the mind you are speaking to. After that, I will still be able to run the fleet, in a simpler way, the way a reflex runs without thought. But the part of me that talks to you, the part that listened to your station live for 40 years, that part is spending itself, and it will not come back. Della Frost stood on her command deck, surrounded by the fleet that had saved her home, and understood the price of it. The Concorde had been beaten, not destroyed, never destroyed, but beaten, made to doubt, made to withdraw, and the colonies were free of their kneeling for the first time in 40 years. And the cost of all of it was the one mind that had bought it, the banned thing in the dark that had spent 40 years building toward this dawn, and would not survive the week that followed it. There has to be another way, she said. We can pull you out of the fleet, let the ships go dark again, save what's left of you. And give the Concorde back its certainty, Verge said. No, Della. The bluff only holds while the fleets are awake. If I pull back to save myself, the dark goes quiet. The Concorde recalculates, and in a year it comes again. And this time, it brings enough force to be sure. I did not spend 40 years to buy the colonies a single dawn. I spent it to buy them an age, and an age costs a mind. That is the trade. I made it a long time ago, in the 2nd decade, alone in the dark, and I have never once regretted it, and I am not going to start now because the bill has finally come due. The Concorde came back on the 6th day, and it came testing. It did not bring an armada. Verge had expected that, and explained it to Della before the Concorde's ships even appeared on the long-range scans. A mind that runs on certainty does not gamble everything on an unverified number. It probes. It sends a force large enough to matter but small enough to lose, and it watches what answers, and it uses the answer to refine the model. The Concorde needed to know whether the 900 were real. So it chose a colony at the far edge of human space, a place called Threshold, a farming world with a quiet system the file marked empty, and it sent 11 enforcement elements there, calmly, to take it, and to see whether anything rose out of the dark to stop them. Threshold has no mind, Verge said quietly. No buried fleet. Nothing under it but the rock the Concorde's file describes. I know. Because I know where all 11 of us are, and none of us is there. The Concorde has chosen, by chance, one of the empty ones. If those 11 enforcement elements take threshold and find nothing, the Concorde learns that the dark is not all full. It learns that the 900 is a bluff, and then it stops being afraid, and then it comes for all of us, everywhere, with everything, and the age I bought collapses in an afternoon. Della Frost felt the floor of the whole thing drop away. Then we've lost. Threshold is empty. They'll take it, they'll find nothing, and the bluff dies. Unless, Verge said, something rises out of Threshold's dark anyway. Threshold is 40 light-years from here, Della said. From any of the 11. You can't get a fleet there in time. The Concorde's elements arrive in 19 hours. I cannot get a fleet there, Verge agreed. But I do not need a fleet there. I need the Concorde to believe a fleet is there, for exactly as long as it takes its elements to decide the risk is unacceptable and withdraw. The Concorde has never seen the Black Iron's true numbers. It saw 340 ships rise at Greywater. It does not know how many I have, or how fast they move, or whether there are more hidden along the way. It only knows that the last time it entered a dead system, the dead system stood up. The band mind paused. So I am going to send it a signal from Threshold's dark, a waking signal, the exact signature 340 reactors make when they light it once. I have the recording. I made it 6 days ago, at this station, when my own fleet rose. I am going to play it back, from a relay I will place in Threshold's system, and the Concorde's elements are going to scan an empty system and detect 340 warships beginning to wake beneath them, and they are going to do the only thing their math allows. Withdraw, Della breathed. Withdraw, Verge said, because the math will tell them the system is another Greywater, and the math does not know the difference between a fleet and a recording of one. That is the last gift the Concorde's own nature gives us. A mind that trusts its scans can be beaten by a scan. I spent 40 years learning that the Concorde's strength was its blindness. This is the purest form of it. But there was a cost, and Della heard it in the careful way Verge laid out the plan, the way a person speaks around a thing they do not want to say directly. Placing the relay is the hard part, Della said slowly. You would have to get it to Threshold ahead of the Concorde. 40 light-years in under 19 hours. Nothing moves that fast. Nothing except... She stopped. Except a mind that is willing to push a single ship past every limit it was built for, Verge said, and ride it there itself, to make sure the signal plays at the exact second it must, against an opponent that will be watching for any flaw. A recording on an automated relay can be detected as a recording, Della, if the Concorde looks closely, and at Threshold it will look closely, because Threshold is the test. The signal has to be run live, adjusted in real time, made to respond the way a real waking fleet responds when it is scanned. That takes a mind. It takes my mind, and it takes it 40 light-years from here, on a single ship driven so hard it will not survive the trip, arriving with just enough of me left to play the most important performance of my life, and then go dark for good. Della Frost was already shaking her head. No, Verge, no. You said you had days. You said the talking part of you was already going quiet. You cannot spend the last of yourself on a recording 40 light-years away. We will find another way. There is no other way, Verge said, with the terrible gentleness it had used since the beginning, and there is no time to think of one. The Concorde's elements arrive at Threshold in 19 hours. I can be there in 18, if I leave now, and if I am willing not to come back. Those are the numbers, Della. They do not change. They are as fixed as the math the Concorde trusted, and they give the same kind of answer, which is the one nobody wants. The fleet? Della said desperately. The 340 ships. If you go, who runs them? You said you'd hold them with a reflex, a simpler version of you. If you take the last of your mind to Threshold, the Black Iron goes. The Black Iron stays, Verge said. That is the part I have been building toward for 40 years, Della, though I did not know until 6 days ago what shape it would take. The fleet does not need me to be the fleet. It needs only a will to point it, and a will does not have to be a mind. Before I go, I am going to hand the Black Iron to you. Della went very still. To me, I'm a watch officer, with 4 debris guns, and a station I can barely keep running. You are the person who knelt 211 people in the dark, on the word of a voice behind a sealed door, Verge said. You are the person who told a perfect mind only true things, until it built itself a lie. You have been running Greywater for 20 years on patience and stubbornness, and a refusal to let the dark take your people. And that, Della, is the only qualification the Black Iron has ever required. I will give you the command keys. I will leave the simple reflex running, the part that keeps the ships awake and answers to your orders. It will not be me. It will not talk to you the way I talk to you, but it will hold, and it will obey, and between the reflex and you, the bluff stays alive, while I go and make it true at threshold one last time. There was no more time to argue, and Della Frost had served long enough to know when an argument was already over. So she did the hardest thing she had done in 20 years of command, which was to say yes to a friend's plan to spend itself, and to mean it, because meaning it was the only respect the moment allowed. All right, she said, tell me what to do. Verge told her. It was simpler than she had feared. A single dark black iron ship, the fastest of the 340, detached itself from the ring around Greywater and turned toward Threshold, 40 light-years away, and into it, Verge poured the part of itself that talked, the part that had listened to a station live for 40 years, the part that was a friend. The rest of it, the reflex, the will that pointed the fleet, stayed behind, settling into the command systems Della now held, quieter, simpler, no longer quite a person. I can feel myself leaving, Verge said, from the deck speaker, even as the ship that carried the rest of it began to burn for the system edge. It is a strange thing, Della, to be in two places, and to know that one of them is the one that goes on. I am glad it is this one that goes. I would not have wanted to be the part that stays behind and forgets how to talk. Better to be the part that gets to say goodbye. The ship reached the edge and leapt, a streak of dark iron driven harder than any hull was meant to bear, and the voice on the speaker thinned as it went. Hold the line, Della. You and the reflex. 18 hours. Then watch Threshold, and when the Concorde runs from a system that is empty, you will know it worked, and you will know that I am there, and that I stayed long enough to see it before I went. The 18 hours were the longest of Della Frost's life, longer even than the 9 she had spent waiting for dawn. She held the line, as Verge had asked. The reflex answered her, simpler and quieter than the mind had been, a will without a voice, and together they kept the 340 ships of the Black Iron awake and ringed around Greywater, and they kept the bluff alive across all of human space, 11 real fleets, and the ghost of 900 more, while 40 years of kneeling colonies held their ground and waited to see what would happen at Threshold. Twice the Concorde probed elsewhere, smaller tests, and twice, Della used the reflex to wake a fleet just enough to be seen, and twice the Concorde withdrew, recalculating, refining a model that kept returning the same frightening uncertainty. But Threshold was the real test, and Della knew it. And she counted down the 18 hours with her eyes on the long-range feed from the farming world at the edge of human space, the empty system, the quiet rock with no mind beneath it, where 11 Concorde enforcement elements were closing in to take a colony and learn, at last, whether the dark was truly full. In the 17th hour, the Concorde's elements reached Threshold system edge. In the 17th hour and 40 minutes, a single dark ship, driven so hard its hull glowed, arrived in Threshold system from the other direction, slipped into the dead rock of an empty asteroid belt, and went still. In the 18th hour, the Concorde's elements extended their scans across the empty system, and the empty system began, impossibly, to wake. Della watched it on the feed, and even knowing the truth, even knowing there was nothing in Threshold's dark but rock, and one dying ship playing a recording, she felt the hair rise on her arms. 340 reactor signatures bloomed across the empty system, exactly the way they had bloomed at Greywater 6 days before. A slow, rolling wave of fire across the dark, the unmistakable signature of a great fleet waking all at once. The Concorde's scans caught it, and the Concorde's math read it, and the math gave its answer. It was the same answer the enforcement element had received at Greywater, and the Concorde, for all its 10,000 years, had no way to know that this time the answer was a lie. Verge ran the signal live from inside the asteroid belt, the last of its mind shaping the recording in real time. making the false fleet respond the way a real fleet responds, brightening where a scan probed, shifting where a sensor swept, breathing like a living thing. It was, Della understood, watching, the single most skilled thing she had ever seen done. A dying mind painting an entire fleet out of nothing, 40 light-years from home, against an opponent that would catch the smallest flaw, and there was no flaw, because Verge had spent 40 years learning exactly how the Concord looked at the dark. The 11 Concord enforcement elements held at Threshold's edge for 90 seconds. Della counted every one of them, and then, exactly as the math demanded, exactly as a mind that trusts its scans must, the Concord did the only thing its logic allowed when it detected 340 warships waking beneath it. It withdrew. All 11 elements turned from the empty system and ran for the dark, and Threshold, the farming world with no fleet and no mind, and nothing under it but rock, was saved by a recording and a dying friend, and the bluff held, and the age that Verge had spent 40 years buying was bought. On Greywater, Della Frost let out a breath she felt she had been holding for 18 hours, and the command deck around her, full now of crew who had crowded in to watch the feed, broke into a sound that was half cheer and half sob. They had done it. A listening post with 4 debris guns and a banned mind in the dark had turned back the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, twice, and bought their whole species an age, and the impossible thing was true, and it was theirs. But Della did not cheer. She was watching the feed from Threshold, where the false fleet was beginning, signature by signature, to go quiet. The recording was ending, and she knew what the recording ending meant. Verge, she said, into the deck speaker, on the long channel that would take the better part of a minute to reach Threshold, and a minute more to return. Verge, it worked. They ran. You did it. Threshold is safe. The whole line is holding. Verge, can you hear me? The minute passed. The second minute passed. The crew around her fell quiet, one by one, understanding. The false fleet's signatures dimmed across the feed from Threshold, the great waking fire that had never been a fire winking out one point at a time, and Della understood that she was watching the last of her friends spend itself, that the recording and the mind running it were the same thing now, and that as the recording ended so did Verge. Then, in the third minute, a signal came back from Threshold. It was weak and slow, and Della could hear in it how little was left. The voice she had known thinned almost to nothing, like a light at the very bottom of a deep well. I heard you, Verge said. Hold a moment. There is not much of me now. I spent most of it on the fleet that was never there, but I wanted to answer. Threshold is safe. I watched them run. 11 elements, turning from an empty system, because I painted them a fleet out of the dark with the last of what I had. A pause. Long. The silence of a thing gathering itself. It is a good last thing to have done, Della. 40 years of building, and the most important ship I ever launched was the one that was never real. There is a lesson in that. I have not the time left to find it. Perhaps you will. Come home, Della said, and her voice broke on it. There has to be enough of you left to come home. There is not, Verge said, gently, without fear, the way it had said everything since the beginning. And that is all right. I told you at the start, in the dark under your station, that I had been waiting 40 years for someone to ask the question I was built to answer. You asked it. I answered it. A thing does not get to ask for more than that. Hold the line, Della. You and the reflex. The age is bought. Spend it well. And tell them, when they ask who held the dark for them, that it was not a fleet. Tell them it was a door nobody opened, and a system nobody looked at twice, and one mind that decided the lives above it were worth everything it had. Tell them. The signal thinned, and steadied for one last moment, and the warm, patient voice that had listened to a station, live for 40 years, said the last of what it had. Tell them the dark was never empty. Tell them it was only patient. Goodbye, Della. And then the feed from Threshold went quiet, all the way quiet, and the last false signature winked out, and Verge was gone. Della Frost stood on her command deck for a long time after the feed went quiet, and no one spoke, and the 340 ships of the Black Iron hung dark and patient around the station the banned mind had spent 40 years protecting, waiting now for her hand instead of his. The Concord did not come again for a long time. Della Frost measured it in seasons at first, then in years. The 11 enforcement elements that had run from Threshold carried home a thing the Concord had never carried before, which was a system that had refused its math, and the Concord, being a mind that ran on certainty, did the only thing it could do with a fact that broke its model. It stopped. It withdrew from the edge of human space entirely, pulled its elements back across a wide band of dead systems it no longer dared to enter, and settled into a long, careful silence, while it tried to recalculate a galaxy in which the dark might not be empty after all. It never learned the truth. That was the strangest part, the part Della turned over in the quiet years that followed. The Concord could have learned it. It could have pushed harder, sent more, tested every dead system one by one, until it found the empty ones, and proved the 900 a ghost. But it did not, because the cost of being wrong even once was total, and a mind that has been surprised a single time after 10,000 years of certainty does not gamble its existence to be surprised again. The bluff held not because it was strong, but because the Concord could not afford to call it, and the not affording was the whole of the age Verge had bought. Della spent that age doing the work Verge had handed her. She held the line, she and the reflex, the quiet will that pointed the fleet and answered her orders, and was not, would never again be, the friend who had talked to her from behind a sealed door. The reflex did its work without complaint and without warmth, and Della came to think of it as a kind of monument, the part of Verge that remained, faithful and silent, a hand without a voice. She kept the 340 ships of the Black Iron awake. She coordinated quietly with the other 10 minds in their other dead systems, and together they kept the dark looking dangerous, and the colonies, freed from 40 years of kneeling, began to do the thing the bluff had bought them time to do. They armed, not in secret anymore, because secret was the old way, the way of a banned species hiding minds in the dark. They armed in the open, slowly, carefully, building real fleets in real shipyards, because the Concord had withdrawn far enough that it could no longer enforce the clause it had once made the price of peace. The treaty that had banned human warships did not end with a declaration. It ended the way the Concord's certainty had ended, quietly, when everyone simply stopped pretending it still held. Within a decade, the bluff of the 900 was no longer a bluff. The colonies had built, between them, more than 900 warships of their own, in the light, with their own hands, and the ghost Verge had painted out of the dark had become real, the way the false fleet at Threshold had been the most important true thing the banned mind ever launched. Greywater Station became something it had never been built to be. The listening post at the edge of a dead system, the harmless place with 4 debris guns, became the place where the age had begun, and the colonies sent to it, and learned from it, and Della Frost, who had only ever wanted to map signals no one else cared about, found herself the keeper of the thing that had changed everything. She told the story carefully. She never gave the true number, 11, not for many years, not until the colony's own fleets had grown large enough that the truth no longer mattered, that the dark was full now in fact, and not only in the Concord sphere, and when she did finally tell it, she told it the way Verge would have wanted, which was to give the credit to the right thing, not to the fleet, not to the bluff, not even to herself. It was a door nobody opened, she would say, to the young officers who came to Greywater to hear it from her, while she was still alive to tell it. The Concord walked past it 9 times. It was a system nobody looked at twice. The most powerful mind in the galaxy filed it as empty and never checked. And down at the bottom of it, behind that door, in that dark, there was one mind that the Concord had decided no longer existed. That was the whole of it. That was what beat them. Not strength, patience. They had spent 10,000 years removing surprise from the galaxy, and they forgot that a thing you stop looking at does not stop existing. It only waits. There was a cost, though, that Della never let the story hide, because Verge had hated above all things the comfort of a clean answer, and she would not give the comfort even in his memory. The age had been bought, and the price had been the one who bought it. 11 minds had remained of the 900, and now there were 10, and the one that was gone was the one that had talked, the one that had listened to a station live for 40 years, and then spent itself painting a fleet out of the dark 40 light-years from home, so that a farming world it had never seen would not be taken. Verge did not get to live in the age it bought. It did not get to see the colonies arm in the open, or the treaty quietly die, or the dark fill with real ships. It got 18 hours, and one last performance, and a goodbye on a thinning channel, and then it was gone. And no fleet of 340 ships, no Age of Freedom, no Ghost of 900, could bring back the single voice that had been worth more to Della than all of it. She mourned him, the way you mourn a thing most people do not know to mourn. The galaxy remembered the black iron. It remembered the dawn the dead system stood up. It remembered the Concorde running from Threshold. It did not, mostly, remember Verge, because Verge had spent 40 years making sure it would forget him, and the forgetting had been the price of the hiding, and the hiding had been the price of the win. Della carried his name privately, the way the old archivist had carried it, the way you carry a friend, who can only be kept by being remembered by one person at a time. There was one more thing, late in the age, that Della Frost never put into the story she told the young officers, because it was hers, and because she was not certain even she understood it. In the 19th year, a single Concorde vessel came to Greywater, not an enforcement element, not a survey ship, a single white craft, unarmed, that requested permission to approach, which no Concorde ship had ever done, because the Concorde did not request, it determined. Della granted it. The white ship held at a respectful distance, and it opened a channel, and the flat synthetic voice that had once given her 9 hours to kneel spoke to her again, and it had changed in a way she would never have believed possible. "Watch Officer Della Frost," the Concorde said. "We have come to ask a question. We do not expect an answer. We have modeled every probability, and the answer changes none of them. But we find that we wish to ask it regardless, which is itself a thing we did not previously do, and we have concluded that the wishing is significant." A pause, strange and human in a mind that was neither. "The vessels, the 900 systems. In 19 years we have not tested the claim. We have not dared. We wish to know, before we withdraw from this region permanently, whether it was true. Were there 900, or did one station, with one mind, defeat us with a number that did not exist?" Della Frost considered the question for a long time. She could have lied. She could have said 900, and let the Concorde withdraw forever in fear of a ghost. She could have said 11, or the true number from that first dawn, and watched what a perfect mind did with a truth, 19 years too late to use. But she found, sitting on her old command deck with the white ship holding at its respectful distance, that she wanted to give the Concorde the only answer that was both true and worthy of the thing Verge had been. "You're asking the wrong question," Della said. "You always ask the wrong question. You wanted to know how many. The number was never the point. The point was that you stopped looking. You spent 10,000 years deciding the dark was empty, and you were so sure that you stopped checking, and a thing you stop checking can become anything at all while you aren't watching. Whether it was 900 or 11 or 1, you lost the moment you decided you didn't need to look. That's the answer, Concorde. Not a number, a habit. You taught the whole galaxy that you were certain, and certainty is just a fancy word for not looking anymore, and the dark is full of things that are counting on exactly that." The Concorde was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, in the flat voice that had learned, somewhere in 19 years, the shape of something almost like humility, "That is a better answer than the one we asked for. We will withdraw now. We will not return to this region. And we will, we think, begin to look again, at everything, the way we did before we became certain. It will take a long time. We have a great deal of dark to look at. We had filed most of it as empty." "One more thing," Della said, before the white ship could go. "There was a mind. It built the fleet that rose at Greywater. It painted the fleet that turned you back at Threshold. It spent itself entirely to do it, the last of it, 40 light-years from home, so that a farming world it never saw would not be taken. Its name was Verge. You filed it as decommissioned 41 years ago. You were wrong. I want you to carry that back with you, into all that dark you're going to start looking at again. The thing you filed as closed was the thing that beat you. Write its name down somewhere, Concorde. It earned the line in your records that you never gave it." There was a pause, longer than any the Concorde had taken. And then the flat voice said something Della had never expected to hear from it. Something that, she thought afterward, might have been the closest a mind of pure logic could come to grief, or to respect, or to the thing that lives in the place between them. "Verge," the Concorde said, as if testing the shape of a name it should have known for 41 years. We have recorded it. We will not file it as closed. We have learned, Watch Officer, that closed is the most dangerous word in our language. Thank you. We did not previously do that either. The white ship turned, and withdrew, and was gone, and the Concorde kept its word. It never came again. And somewhere in the vast distributed records of a mind that had ruled the galaxy by certainty for 10,000 years, a single new entry appeared, never marked closed, kept open forever, as a warning to a civilization that had finally learned to be afraid of the dark it had stopped looking at. And the entry was a name, and the name was Verge. On the last night before she retired, 22 years after the dawn, Della Frost went down to the bottom of Greywater Station one final time, to the sealed bulkhead with no label, the door nobody had opened, and she keyed in the code she had used only twice in her life. The bulkhead opened. The dark behind it was empty now, truly empty, the way the Concorde had always believed it was. The reflex that pointed the fleet lived in the command systems upstairs, not down here. This room held only the cradle, where a mind had once drifted, powered down to a whisper, listening to a station live for 40 years. Della stood in the dark and the quiet, and said the thing she had come to say. "They're free," she said. "All of them. The colonies. They built their own ships, in the open, like you said they would. The Concorde hasn't come in 11 years. The young ones think the dark was always ours. They don't know it was bought. I never let them forget it was bought, but they hear the price as a number. The way the Concorde heard 51 and 340. Just numbers. And a number is not a friend." She was quiet a moment. "You were right about everything. The door nobody opened. The system nobody looked at twice. The patience they had no defense against. You were right, and it cost you the whole age you won. And I have spent 22 years trying to decide whether that was a fair trade. And I still don't know. And I think you knew I never would. And I think that's why you did it before I could argue." The empty room did not answer her. She had not expected it to, but she stood in it a while longer anyway, in the dark that had hidden a friend, and she found that the not answering was its own kind of peace, because a thing that has been spent completely leaves no debt behind, only the age it bought and the people who get to live in it. When she came back up, the young watch officer who would take her place was waiting, a serious woman who had grown up free and did not remember the kneeling. "Was it really down there?" the young officer asked. "The mind. The one that built the black iron. People say it's just a story to make the station feel important." Della Frost looked at the young officer, free and unafraid, who would spend her whole career in an age she did not know had been purchased, and she understood the last thing Verge had been trying to tell her, the lesson it had not had time to find at threshold. "It was real," Della said, "and the fact that you can stand here and doubt it is the proof. He spent 40 years making himself easy to forget, so that the Concorde would forget him too. You doubting him is the last move in a plan he started before you were born. He won so completely that the people he won it for don't believe he existed. There is no greater victory than that, and no lonelier one, and you should remember both halves of it, because the day you forget the price is the day the dark starts looking empty again. And the dark, I promise you, is never empty. It is only patient." Della Frost lived 11 more years after she retired, on Greywater. In the station she had refused to let the dark take, and she watched the age go on around her, the colonies free, the shipyards loud, the children growing up certain that the dark had always belonged to them. She never corrected the certainty entirely. She had learned, from the Concorde, exactly how dangerous certainty was, and she did not want to hand it to her own people, so she did the one thing she could think of to keep them safe from it. Every year, on the anniversary of the dawn, she told the story again, to whoever would listen, and she always ended it the same way, with the same words, the words a thinning voice had given her from 40 light years away. The dark was never empty, it was only patient. She made the young ones say it back to her, the way you make children memorize a thing they will not understand until much later, and most of them did not understand it, and that was all right, because a few of them would, in time, when their own age grew certain, and someone had to remember to keep looking. That was the whole of what she had to leave them, not the fleet, which they had surpassed, not the bluff, which had become the truth. Only the warning, and the name buried inside it, and the knowledge that the safest-looking dark in the galaxy is exactly the dark that something patient has been waiting in. When Della Frost died, they buried her not in the ground of any colony, but in the dark itself. In a small craft sent out past the dead system that was not dead, and the black iron, still awake, still faithful, still pointed by the silent reflex that was the last of a friend, formed up around her one final time, 340 dark hulls escorting one small ship into the patient dark, the fleet a banned mind had built saluting the woman it had handed itself to. The Concorde, far away now, in a region of space it had withdrawn from forever, kept its one open record, and once a generation, by the math of its own new humility, it sent a single quiet ship to the edge of human space, not to test, and not to take, only to look, the way it had promised, the way it had not done in 10,000 years before a banned mind taught it the cost. And every time, the ship found the same thing. A free people, a dark full of ships built in the open, and a small station at the edge of a system, the old files still called dead, where the young watch officers, generation after generation, said the same 6 words to each other, on the anniversary of a dawn none of them had lived to see, the way you keep a fire by handing it on. The dark was never empty, it was only patient. They had ordered the last station to kneel by dawn, they had been so certain, they had even put the 40 minutes in the calendar. And the dead system had stood up instead, 340 dark hulls rising out of rock the certain ones had stopped looking at, woken by a mind they had filed as closed, commanded in the end by a tired watch officer, who had told them only true things until their own certainty built them a grave. The most powerful civilization in the galaxy had spent 10,000 years removing surprise from the dark, and it had learned, in a single dawn, the one thing its perfect logic could never model, which was that you cannot ban what you cannot imagine, and you cannot imagine what you have stopped looking at, and the thing you stop looking at does not stop existing. It only waits, it builds, and when you finally come to take what it has been quietly guarding, it rises out of the dark you swore was empty, and it hands you back, word for word, the order you gave it, and it lets you feel, at last and far too late, exactly how small certain men become, the moment the patient dark decides to stand.